short. You know how it is. Hi, that was easy. I guess that means you're ready. Good evening to all of you. My name is Sabina Neem. I'm Associate Director at the Office of Multicultural Affairs at Seattle University. So welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure to have you here for this fabulous moment. And I really think it's like not just an event, it's a moment for us because we have activists and policymakers and researchers and thinkers and visionaries that are coming together from across the nation here at our university. And we don't always get to have the opportunity to hear from people in person in this way who are doing this work across in different areas and places. So just a little bit about how this event got started. It began when Professor Jennifer Sumner in the Criminal Justice Department shared that she had invited this fabulous group of activists and policymakers and researchers to convene at SU. And the focus is on the experiences of systemic barriers of trans people involved in the prison system. So when I heard that there was this working group and Professor Sumner rattled off this list of names, I realized that this was really an opportunity for those of us at SU, but also for the broader community who are working towards trans liberation out in Seattle and beyond. As I began working with Professor Dean Spade on the panel, I also started to share my enthusiasm with students, as I do when I am really excited about something. I basically tell everybody that I cross paths with, which is great because I see a lot of you here. And the students at SU have been mobilizing around the rights of LGBTQ people for quite some time. And in particular, this year, the student government of Seattle University has made commitments to addressing the needs of trans, gender variant, and gender non-conforming students, and also students with disabilities on our campus. Additionally, Kelby Lynn from the Justice in a Diverse Learning Community advocated for 2 trainings to be offered centered on trans liberation and how to be in solidarity with trans people, both on campus as students, changing the community in which many of you live and definitely learn, and also beyond that, right, to think about what are the structures and the forces that exist within and beyond our campus. On a university-wide level, the Committee to Improve Trans Inclusion is currently in its implementation phase of creating and converting to increase the number of all-gender bathrooms on campus. And we are additionally working on an FAQ for trans students on getting what they need at SU. And part of it is that there's a lot of unknowns about how to navigate the system at SU if you're trans or gender variant, so making that really transparent. Also a document for faculty on how to support trans and gender nonconforming students in the classroom, and evaluating our data systems and looking at the related name and gender fields of those, data systems, which are expensive and archaic. It's kind of, that's a big project that will take time, but that we're working on. I really want to thank the city colleagues, the Committee to Improve Trans Inclusion, because one of the things that I have realized in my work around changing the systems that affect trans people is that it takes people who are directly impacted, trans people who are directly impacted by these systems, but it also takes a lot of other people who get it, who listen, who center the voices of those people who are expressing what they need, and I feel grateful to have that on this campus. So let's give those folks a round of applause. So it's been busy on campus, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the many people who have made this happen. I'm just gonna rattle it off, and then when I'm done, you can applaud. So the student groups involved include the Student Government of Seattle University, Justice in a Diverse Society Learning Community, Triangle Club, and Gender Galaxy. The campus partners include the Wismer Center for Gender and Diversity and the Wismer Chair, the Committee to Improve Trans Inclusion, and of course the Office of Multicultural Affairs, of which I'm a part. And our off-campus partner in this event that really helped contribute that additional money that we needed to make it all come together is the Pride Foundation. So we're grateful that they were able to sponsor. So if you're part of any of these clubs, if you're part of the Department of Criminal Justice and the College of Arts and Sciences, would you stand? Because all of the clubs and committees that I named, student groups that I named, can you stand so we can see you? Thank you. So, for those of you who are part of the SU community, you know, gratitude is a big part of our lives at the university. And so in this vein, I also want to thank the OMA staff, in particular Curry, Knox, and Jazz Espiritu, who are doing all the lights and have been behind the scenes, and Bobby Helton, who's our LGBTQ program coordinator, conference and events services and media services, and all of the participants of the Trans Correctional Working Group that are here. I feel so grateful that you traveled from so far and made time for us to all be together. And additionally, some students, Kelby Lynn, Haley Bayuga Graff, and Eric Chalmers, to name a few, and the university administration that is in attendance. It's really important that these issues are addressed at all levels, and that there's university support to really make cultural shifts in the university. Our hope today is to further the conversations that have been happening on campus and in community, and to learn how these policing and prison systems work to limit the liberties of trans and gender variant people, and to hear about the work of those who are working daily to address these inequities, each in their own way. So the panel will be moderated by Dean Spade, and there will be time for questions. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Professor Dean Spade, who will then introduce our guests for tonight. Dean is Associate Professor at Seattle University School of Law and is currently a fellow in the Engaging Tradition Project at Columbia Law School. In 2002, he founded the Sylvia Rivera Law Project and is also the author of Normal Life, Administrative Violence, Critical Trans Politics, and the Limits of the Law. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you so much, Sabina, and thanks to Jazz and Curry for making this event happen. And thanks so much to Jen Sumner also for pulling us all together for these meetings we've been having the last 2 days about some of the issues trans folks are facing in prison. I'm going to bring up all the panelists, but first I'm going to be showing a little video, so I didn't want to make it happen behind them. So I'll just do the basic intro, and then we'll do the video, and then we'll have the conversation. I thought it might be interesting to have this conversation a little bit like with reference to the fact that we're living through a pretty weird moment right now, where there's suddenly like a much higher level of visibility about, in particular, trans women of color in prisons in the U.S. In large part, strangely, because of a TV show, Orange is the New Black. It's like so weird, like how this is why things happen in our country, but so it is. And that show, and I think also something that came before that that's related, which is the case of C.C. McDonald. A black trans woman who was attacked in a racist transphobic attack and defended herself and ended up being sentenced to over 2 years in prison and was recently released. Her case generated like an enormous amount of support nationally and internationally and brought a lot of people into awareness of this issue, and also happened during the same time period as Trayvon Martin's murder and Marissa Alexander's case. And so there's kind of, I think, an interesting conversation happening about a range of things related to the murder of black people, gendered violence, and policing criminalization, concepts of self-defense, et cetera. And they're all happening at the same time, that there's this kind of strange media moment where for the first time maybe ever we're actually seeing a conversation about Black trans women, in which Black trans women are having leadership in that conversation and setting a lot of the terms. Also, I mean, obviously, you have to mention Janet Mock's presence in that conversation as well. So it's a very interesting moment, and this one that I didn't really expect I would see. And this panel, I think, is a chance for us to kind of have a conversation about that and the work that some activists who are with us tonight are doing about the broader context that surrounds that conversation. I think you all probably know what that context is, right? But I feel like it must always be mentioned, right? That this discussion or interest in trans imprisonment is happening in the context of decades of unparalleled prison growth in the United States, right? That has brought the United States to become the most imprisoning country in the world, and the most imprisoning country that has ever existed in the world, in which we have 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's prisoners, and in which we run a prison system that is intensely targeted at people of color, especially Black people, and is intentionally gendered and racialized and targets people with disabilities and poor people. And that expansion has happened a lot through drug policy and through kind of the criminalization of poverty. And there's also a simultaneous expansion of imprisonment happening in our immigration system, which has been even more recent. Just in the last decade or so, it's quadrupled immigration imprisonment in the US. And Obama, of course, is the most imprisoning president ever, and he's about to reach the 2 million, the most deporting president ever. He's about to reach the 2 million deportations mark, which we'll be seeing a lot of activism and attention being brought to that by activists around the country. And of course, queer and trans people are deeply, deeply impacted, right, by these systems of border enforcement and imprisonment, but often have been marginalized in some ways from the conversation. It often seems like there's a divide between a conversation about queer and trans rights or whatever that is, and then a conversation about imprisonment and immigration. So there's interesting, because in this moment in the US, we're also seeing some openings and conversations about criminalization and racism. I think there's a conversation happening more now than there used to be about school discipline and how it's heavily racialized and pushes youth of color out of schools. And we're seeing a bigger conversation about mass imprisonment and the crisis of that. And in our region, we've recently seen a really awesome action to shut down deportations. I think it was a week or week and a half ago at the Tacoma Detention Center. Yay, activists here are involved in that. And right here on 12th Avenue, we have a controversy happening over the county's plans to spend $210 million to build a new youth prison, a new youth jail that many of us are fighting against. And there's these pink postcards up here that you can find and grab to learn more and fill out on the back what you think should happen instead of the county building a new $210 million cage for young people. I recommend looking at the website of the Washington Incarceration Stops Here group. Their website is nonewyourthjail.something. Anyway, it's complicated, I think, to think about this moment because queer and trans people are sometimes left out of analysis about those systems, as I mentioned. But at the same time, sometimes queer and trans people and women become reasons or talking points for expanding those systems. So at the same time, there's a national conversation about how people are pushed out of schools through school discipline programs that are racist. We also see a call, usually in the name of white gay people, to expand anti-bullying measures in schools, which actually are part of pushing youth of color out of schools, including queer and trans youth, right? And we see this with the dilemma around, hate crimes laws, which expand the criminal punishment system and give more resources to local law enforcement being passed in the name of protecting queer and trans people, even though the police and prisons are actually the #1 predators of queer and trans people. And so there's this conversation happening in a lot of different parts of the anti-violence movement about how criminalization is often expanded in the names of the very people who are most harmed by criminalization expansion. And that's one of the really big dilemmas, I think, facing our movements right now. So tonight we're going to talk about what Sabina titled the panel, The Carceral State, and we're going to talk about it and how it's an apparatus of racialized gender violence and how trans people are resisting it. And I wanted to start with Cece because I think that her case is really important, and I think she's a really inspiring, amazing activist who has really blown people's minds with the things that she's been saying on TV since she got out. She's really, and other things she was writing while she was inside. So I wanted to start with that. So I want to just, before we begin, as a way to kind of give us all something to talk about, additionally, is show 3 short clips from Cece's recent appearance on Democracy Now! She appeared with Alisha, who's on our panel, and with Laverne Cox. The 3 clips I'm going to show briefly are a bit about her experience in prison, a bit about kind of her broader story, and then her responding to seeing some footage about, that I'm not going to show about, Elon Nettles, who is a trans woman killed in Harlem in the summer of 2013, where there's been a lot of really amazing activists by trans women of color in New York City responding to that murder. So you'll see also the third clip, that's what Cece's responding to, just to give it context. So can I get this up, and I will.
Prison was a very dark and bad place, basically. I had to deal with a lot of discrimination, more so than any of the other male inmates.
You were put in a men's prison?
Yes, I was put in a men's prison.
You chose not to fight that, to be put in a women's prison?
Yeah, and my reasoning behind that was because
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm going to start that over. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to go back over there. Great, see you later.
Prison was a very dark and bad place, basically. I had to deal with a lot of discrimination, more so than any of the other male inmates.
You were put in a men's prison?
Yes, I was put in a men's prison.
You chose not to fight that, to be put in a women's prison?
Yeah, and my reasoning behind that was because after I did some educating myself on the prison industrial complex and the history behind African Americans in incarceration, I felt like sending me to any prison wouldn't solve my issue. Men's prisons, women's prisons, they're prisons and they're not good. And I felt like instead of focusing all of the energy of I and the support CC committee and the people involved, I told them that we can use that energy to make sure that I'm not being discriminated against, and to make sure that I was safe wherever I went. And so by me doing that, people thought I was kind of crazy, because they was like, well, you know, you deserve to be in a women's prison. But me personally, I felt like it wouldn't solve any problems. It wouldn't change the fact that now I'm a felon. It wouldn't change the fact that I have to be under these harsh and cruel policies by the DLC that everyone has to deal with who is in prison. And so I just kind of stepped back from trying to figure out whether I wanted to be in a men's or women's prison, because it wouldn't help. It wouldn't make me happy. It wouldn't take away that pain that I was dealing with. So I just kind of just let that go and focus my energy on other things.
Alisha, can you?
Well, my story is similar to Laverne's.
Where were you born?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois. And I moved to Minnesota when I was 18. But prior to that, I was very feminine. And I grew up in a big family. My grandma and granddad had 18 kids, 9 boys, 9 girls. And like Laverne said, I grew up in a really heavily religious family, very, as people call them, Bible thumpers. So there was also a lot of policing about my femininity, and it kind of made me hate myself. It made me become, I guess, more rebellious than most teens would at that age when I got to that age. And I pretty much had a hard life. I was out on my own since I was 14. And, you know, from sleeping on park benches and couch hopping and trying to figure out what I was going to do in my life. I really wanted to get a leg up, but it seemed like there was no opportunities for trans women in Chicago. And it seemed like every place I went into turned their backs on me or slammed the door in my face, and it was really hard for me to like figure out what I was going to do with my life. And then after some major consideration, I decided to move to Minnesota after a friend had invited me, and it didn't take me very much time to take her up on her offer because it seemed like I had nothing to go for in Chicago. And she was, telling me that, I can start over and there's more resources and I can get this help and that help. And so it sounded really tasteful. I wanted to, expand my horizons and see what I can, or how I can better myself. And so I moved to Minnesota, and that's when I actually started my transition as far as, hormone therapy and finding a therapist and stuff like that. And that kind of made me build this love for other trans women, like you were saying, because, you have this part of you that's unquestionable, and it's a big mystery until you meet these people, and you're like, yeah, I think I know who I am as a person. And so, sometimes you get a little bad advice, sometimes you get, the best advice. But it was all helpful for me in my transitioning, and, and now I'm here today. So,
Alisha Williams, how common is that trans teens homeless?
At our website, www.srlp.org, we have a number of charts that kind of explain the disproportionate representation of trans people in prison because of things that happened beforehand, being forced into poverty and experiencing houselessness. It could be from family rejection, or it could be the lack of support at school when you're being discriminated against and bullied by other students or by school administrators, or not having safe access to spaces because you're policed when you're just trying to go to the bathroom. Someone trying to tell you that you're going to the wrong bathroom. We have a lot of people who are arrested on the streets because we work with low-income people of color. They're living in neighborhoods that are already heavily policed.
We have a chart right now that was your chart.
Yes.
I want to go back to that chart and go through it because it's quite interesting. When you look at the number of people who are in prison who are trans, you have all trans persons. 16% have gone to prison or jail. Black trans persons, 47%. American Indian trans people, 30%. Trans women, 21%. So of the trans women, 21% have served time in jail, and trans men, 10%. How do you change those numbers?
Well, definitely it's...
Hit very, very close to home.
Yeah. Just watching that kind of just made me go back to that time where I know what it's like to always have this guard up, because you don't never know when somebody will literally try to kill you for just being who you want to be. And to know that Elon's life was taken from her out of hatred and out of ignorance, it really upsets me, because I'm trans, and all the people that I know who are trans that are really close to me, I always have this fear for them, because I would never want someone to get a phone call saying that I was dead, or me getting a phone call saying that one of my friends was dead, because someone just wanted to hurt them. Like, it's rare that you hear about a trans woman living happily and long and having this glorious life where she dies of old age, natural causes, or whatever. Usually, from my own from me knowing about the history of violence against trans women, I've yet to hear of a trans woman who have just lived her life happily, And I'm trying to be one of those women who tells other trans women to educate themselves and to protect themselves and to be safe and to be cautious, because people do not care. Where trans people are like props to people sometimes, I feel like we're just less than human, and it's really ridiculous that we have to live a life like this every day. Like, I and so many other trans women who have dealt with violence, you know, over the course of growing up, you know what I'm saying, have to deal with this on a daily basis. And for me to have to watch that was really heartbreaking, because it's another story. It's another name that we have to add to this day of Trans Day of Remembrance. And I always encourage people to, like, we have to change that. We have to make Trans Day of Remembrance Trans Day of celebration. We need to celebrate our lives. We need to celebrate being human, but it's just too much. I can't
Rivera
right
and
now.
Cox, this hits close to home for you too, as you
It does.
cry.
I think. I think for me, what comes up in listening to Cece talk is the collective trauma that so much of our community faces. And particularly, I think it's important to look at the intersectional piece, that we're usually talking about trans women of color, that there's something about that Black bodies are under attack in this culture and Black trans bodies are under attack. So it's important for us to remember that. And how do we create spaces of healing for ourselves as a community in the face of such oppression, in the face of such trauma? It's devastating.
The lights. You guys come up and I'll introduce you. That's fine. Go ahead. Yeah. We'll meet you back here. Carolyn's going to come back to us in a minute, but I thought that was just like some helpful stuff to kind of, I think a lot of people have been watching this coverage, and I thought it might be useful to kind of bring that into the space, because we're going to have kind of a more informal conversation tonight instead of doing formal presentations. We all know each other and have ways of connecting, and it seems nice to just chat. But let me introduce these people. So Janetta is a trans woman who served 3.5 years in federal prison. And since the day of her release, she's been working with an organization that many of us are huge fans of, TGIJP, Transgender Variant Intersex Justice Project, in the Bay Area. And Janetta actually just got back from Thailand, where she went to the WPATH conference, the World Professional Association of Transgender Health. And she was there advocating around the needs for transgender people who are criminalized to have access to mental and physical health services that are culturally competent. And you'll see, she does a lot of other work beyond that, but that's a starter. Eric is a president's postdoc at UC San Diego and has been part of Critical Resistance and Gay Shame. And Eric is also one of the editors of the book Captive Genders, which has been a really useful tool for a lot of us in the last years. It's a really amazing anthology that brings together lots of people writing about trans imprisonment, people who are currently writing from inside, people who are working on the outside or who are formerly imprisoned. And Eric is also a filmmaker who's made 2 really wonderful activist tools with Chris Vargas. One is called Homotopia and one is called Criminal Queers. And they are really great movies to show that are funny and fun narrative films that can kind of really stimulate a lot of these conversations in activist or social groups or in the classroom. Alisha Williams is the director of the Prisoner Justice Project at the Sylvia Rivera Law Project. So Alisha does direct legal services to people who are currently imprisoned, does a lot of public education work around trans imprisonment, litigation, and also works with SRLP's Prisoner Advisory Committee to do this work that's really about building the leadership of trans people who are currently imprisoned and actually strategizing the ways to end imprisonment and to build a really meaningful dialogue about that's centered in abolition and that that is about addressing the immediate conditions facing trans prisoners now. And Carolyn, who will be right with us in a moment, is an advocate for trans prisoners in Los Angeles. She's a formerly imprisoned person who, as a prisoner, was a fighter for the rights of people in the prison hospital. She's got a lot of experience and brilliance on working on this stuff in the really complex and important context of Los Angeles and more generally in the California system. So we're just going to kind of chat, and Janetta said that she would be willing to start us out. I wonder, Janetta, what came to you as you watched that conversation with Cece and Laverne and Alisha? And Alisha, will you give Janetta the mic? Thank you.
I really identified with everything that Alisha was saying, but what the thing that really struck me is what Laverne began to say. I mean, to me, it was just like, wow, this is what I've been saying all the time. You know, the trauma and the abuse that trans people face. I mean, a cage is a cage is a cage. You taking a person out of one cage and put them into another cage, to me, that doesn't make sense. Improve the conditions. I mean, the best thing that I could think of is improve the conditions of how people are treated. And specifically, as you think of somebody like Cece doing 2 years opposed to, I'm sure, all the people that she met and connected with that are doing so many years, and just having the opportunity to be conscious and cognizant and to meet other transgender people and talk with them and listen to their lives and hear their stories and, you know, ask them how to, you know, how they got there. It's just like you have so much understanding and compassion, and it's so like just how the drop of the hat, you know, life can just completely change and turn around, it's just the conditions. I mean, it really needs to be looked at. I will always say that there are so many women that are in custody that are being sexually abused, exploited, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and they don't even have a clue. They don't even have a clue. Whatever they throw in front of them, if you throw eyeliner and mascara in front of them, I mean, that would be okay. And what makes it okay is because the system has brainwashed, has taken all the value out of transgender people. I mean, I've never felt so devalued as a human being. I've never felt so devalued as a human being than I did when I was in prison. And I thought, I had this thought, I can remember I had this very clear thought that, you know, I felt like, you know, sometimes, you know, like you say somebody treats you like a dog, but I think about, I live in the city of San Francisco, and I thought, oh my God, I can't be treated like a dog because people love their dogs in San Francisco. I mean, everybody loves pets. I mean, San Francisco is a dog-friendly city. And so I sort of kind of just related to like just a piece of wood, like lost in the woods that everybody took their turns stepping on, sitting on, spitting on, and just walking over. And yeah, so I'm gonna slow down for a minute and yeah.
Great, thanks. Yeah. So, does anyone want to take it up, or want me to ask you questions? Alisha, will you talk a little bit about this media moment that is happening? I know that that like SLP's worked a lot with Laverne, and that there's kind of this conversation happening, and if you have thoughts on how what's being represented relates to or doesn't relate to what you see trans people in prison who are SLP's clients talking about, and your kind of the direction you see things going.
I think with the media attention to the Chelsea Manning case in New York, there was some media attention to Elon Nettles' murder. And with Laverne Cox in Orange is the New Black, we are seeing an increase in the media attention to issues of incarceration, particularly facing trans people of color. And Laverne Cox is an amazing advocate and actress, and she does a great job of taking the opportunity she's been given to explain how that show that so many people have come to love, like, that show doesn't actually depict the realities of trans people who are incarcerated. She's been to SRLP's offices in New Orleans and California. Like, she travels around speaking to people who are directly impacted by these systems, and she does a great job of taking those stories to the media and explaining this is how it actually is. Sophia Burset is in a women's facility. She's having trouble getting access to health care, but she has a seemingly decent life. She's able to do hair in prison, like, and all these wonderful things, and she says that's not really how it is. What SRLP did recently was we wrote to our prisoner advisory committee members, which is a group of about 70 people incarcerated in New York State men's prisons who identify as trans, gender nonconforming, or allies. And we explained to them, like, this massive media moment right now. And we told them who Rivera and Cox is. We talked about Chelsea Manning. We let them know what's going on the outside. And we asked people to respond. And we put some of those responses up on our Prisoner Advisory Committee blog on our website. And there were some people who responded and said, this is amazing. It's great that people are paying attention. Please share my story, share my name. Tell me if I could, like, write to these media outlets myself. And we also had other people who were just like, there's no actress, no person who's on the outside who can relay my realities. So one of the things that we do is, beyond allowing shows like Democracy Now! To contact us and sharing the stage, is we try to develop the stories of people who are incarcerated ourselves. We want to make sure that it's the people on the inside who are telling their stories. Because a lot of times we're wary of doing these interviews. Amy Goodman did a decent job on Democracy Now!, but, like, a lot of you may have seen Pierce Morgan's interview of Janet Mock and Katie Couric and all these other people who ask ridiculously invasive questions, and when they're sharing these stories, it's all about, so what about your transition? What about your story? Have you had this surgery? And we can't allow them to frame the issue, and that's what Laverne has been pushing, and that's what we have been pushing with our work in sharing the Prisoner Advisory Committee blog, in sharing our newsletter with people who are incarcerated and people on the outside. And I know Janetta and a couple of other groups that do the same thing as far as circulating our newsletters and putting our stories out there via our own outlets or media outlets that we actually trust. So the media attention, it's exciting and scary at the same time if we leave too much control and allow people to tell stories for us and for our communities. So we're trying to do our best to take advantage of the attention that we're receiving to actually let people know what the realities are, which is difficult work when you're also trying to do the advocacy and all this other work.
I know you got something to say. Well, so one of the things that we've been talking about the last few days that Janetta was also just talking about is the deep intensity of the dehumanization of the way that trans people are policed and imprisoned. And I know that you've done a lot of advocacy around the things facing trans people who are in prison in California and in Southern California, and I wonder if you'd talk about that.
Okay. Well, first, what I want to do is I want to talk about myself as an individual and what I went through personally being in prison. I'm going to tell you why I went to prison and the reason why I went. Well, first of all, I'm sorry, you all. Hello, Seattle University. See, I get to do this everywhere I go. I did it at UCLA. I did it at Irvine, so it's so much fun. Okay. Now, my name is Carolyn Henry. I'm 56 years old. I'm from Lake Charles, Louisiana. I came here to California in 1965 to live with my mother, who she wasn't too happy about me becoming a woman at the age when I became a woman, but she'll get over it, like we all have. Surprisingly, my father, who's a military man that made a career out the Air Force, was 151,000% supportive of me. And we have the same name, only difference is I have a middle initial and he doesn't. So, you know, there's still that closeness that you want your son to be your son, but here you are, you have a son that is your daughter, your oldest too. So for him to accept me makes me want to better myself and be a better transgender woman. I went to prison because a man slapped the out of me, and I stabbed him twice. He had it coming. He had it coming. You! I wouldn't have done that on a normal day. I was just walking down the street, on my way, minding my business, going to get a chest x-ray to make sure the kids was okay. I was just taking care of my kids that day, and he decided, because I don't know what it was. I met the guy with a group of people, and so I met you. I mean, when I passed by you, hi, how you doing? But I guess he had another world going on up there, and I guess he thought he wanted more, and I just couldn't give him what he wanted. So he slapped me, and when he slapped me, I slapped him with that knife twice. And I went to jail, and while I was in jail, I had been in trouble before, and my mother had gotten me this lawyer. And this lawyer came, and he said, well, you know they're going to give you, this is your third strike. And this is what I hate about the system and the people. And I don't want you all to hate me. Don't get angry. But this lawyer just was a piece of crap, and he didn't do what he was supposed to have done. And my mother had gave him her hard-earning money, because my mother knew in her heart, regardless to the fact that I am gay, that I dress like a woman, that I live as a woman, I was a respectable person. I was a human being. We may have our ups and downs, but when it came to it, I had the utmost respect for her, because she went and got this lawyer. I don't want to say his name. He's an old man now. His son had murdered someone during the time that I had gotten arrested. So, weigh it out. Your kid, your kid. Well, I was the kid that didn't get the attention. So I was staying in the county jail for 4 months, and he just didn't do his job, but I took the deal. They said 8.5 years, because if I would have fought the case, which I was right for what I did. Maybe I went a little bit too far by doing what I did, but the protection part of the deal, I was all right with it, because I knew I'm not going down like that. I'm just not going down like that for nobody. I do not care who you are. I walk where I want to walk. I do what I want to do because I'm a respectable person, and you're not going to take that away from me. You understand? So I took the 8 years, which it was 80%, and they gave me, I had to do 6 years. So I said, crap, 6 years? I think I was 43, something like that, 43 years old, 45 maybe. And I said, oh God, I'm gonna be old when I get out. But I said, well, what the hell, I gotta do this time, so let me just go in and do it. What are your plans, girl? All right, you've been on your own for all these years. Your butt didn't get your GED. Okay, this is a fine time to get your GED. This is a fine time to work and save your little money while you're in jail. And I have a religious background also. My family's Baptist. But I believe that God loves us all, and I believe that God wants to help us all if we just submit to what he wants us to submit to. Because we were all born into sin for what Adam did and Eve did in the Garden of Eden. People just don't get this, but I got this. And I'm not saying this to everybody to preach to you. I'm just telling you what I got. So if Adam and Eve ate from the tree of life and they sinned, everything else that they passed on, all their seeds passed on, it was into sin. It was nothing but sin. So that means when we are born in this world, we're born into moisturizing sin of the seed. And then God sent his son down on this earth, supposedly Son of God is out. Have anybody went to see that movie, Son of God? It's a very good movie. You should check it out. It explains everything that I'm saying. This is just my belief. And God sent his son on this earth to die for our sins. And if we have faith and believe in that, then we will make it. Well, I believe that I will, because when I was in prison, a guy on the yard, a friend of mine says, would you come to church with me? I said, sure. I went to church with him, and I loved it. I joined the choir. I took the Bible studies to find out different information that I needed to find out for myself. I can't make no one else do anything, but I found out for myself. It was beneficial for me. I took a life purpose-driven program by Rick Warren. I enjoyed that. I got a good thing out of that. I worked in the dry cleaners first, and then I got into the jacket factory, and I got to the point where I can assemble a jacket in 45 minutes from top to bottom. I was one of the best that they had in there. They wanted me to be the lead person, but I didn't feel like being the lead person. But I got good money, and I saved my money. And I didn't really tolerate too much stuff from guys that came from other institutions that tried it with me. Yes, they did try it with me. Yes, they would call me that name. But then other guys would say, do you know what that person's in here for? And don't you know that that person will fight you so fast? And don't you know that person can kind of fight too? So those guys, you don't want to get embarrassed by that person, do you? So the guys would think twice about it. The bigger guys with the bigger muscles, God bless their little old souls, they were the ones that were the humble ones to me. The little guys that had to prove something to the other guys, I guess, they were the ones that talked. But when they would talk, I would look at them, and I wouldn't say anything, because you don't say anything to them. Going about your business. But when one come, wear him out. If you don't know how to fight, do your best. Go down with this here. So no one, I didn't really have to go through that one time. I had a problem, and the other guy said, no, we don't want you to get in trouble. You know, we'll talk to him, and they went and talked to him, and I didn't have any more problems. But I went to groups, and the group that I was in a group with a bunch of lifers. So this is how I get my strength and know how to deal with people. I was in a group for angry people, okay? And they called me angry because I stabbed someone protecting myself. Can you believe it? And I was in this group, and all the guys in this group, it was 15 of us, and I was the only one with a release date. The only one. And those guys drilled me. They said, look, you can't come back in here no more. You'll die. You'll die an old queen. Look at us. We're going to die in here. We're never going home. You can get out there and do something for everybody in here. Just you staying out, just you speaking, just you asking for help for us. Whether we ever see you again or not is all that we ask for. These were heterosexual guys that was never getting out. They said, we look up to you, and we love you very much. We love your personality. You make us laugh. And he said, I'd like to tell my wife about you. Can I tell my wife about you? And I said, you can tell her anything you want to tell. That's your business. You know, just make it good, baby. And that's how I personally got along with people in prison. I prayed, and people that pray mind their business, and they have a humble spirit, and I needed that because I had a cellie that took a pill that would knock him out, but when he woke up in the morning, he had attitude, and he was just that much shorter than me. And I would look at him, and I loved him. We were together for 5 years. And I told him, I said, you know what? You need to settle down. You really need to think about what you're doing. You're taking a pill, and you're going home, and that pill makes you angry. because you need to sleep. What you need to do is stop staying on that yard and get you a job and start focusing on your job and get real tired and save your money. Maybe you'll be a happier person. So he did, and he became a happier person. And we lived happy in that cell because he wasn't waiting for me to get home and do everything. He went out and started doing things too for mommy. So we didn't have no more problems with that. So, but the girls in there, a lot of the girls that was in there with me, they wasn't seeking that, so I couldn't go the road that they wanted to go. My mother is a go-getter. She's an educator. She's a school teacher. I have another sister that's a school teacher, 2 other sisters that's school teachers. So my mind and my thoughts are different from a lot of the other girls. And I was a hustler. I did drugs, and I was homeless. And I was embarrassed because I didn't want to be that way anymore. I didn't want that for my life anymore. So I raised myself up. When I went to prison, I got my act together. And like I said, I went to church and I had a good job. The policies that they have, because I'm going to talk about policies now. The policies that they have for the girls in there then was hormones. And they were giving pills at first. And there was a doctor that I had in there named Dr. Denise Taylor that sympathized with the girls, so to say, and wanted to work for the girls and do good things for the girls where the girls could have access to information, health care information, and they fired her. So now she has her own practice in San Luis Obispo. And if anyone want to know anything about her, her name is Dr. Denise Taylor, and I think she has a private practice now in San Luis Obispo, California. Fabulous woman.
Maybe we'll have a conversation a little bit now about that question. I think healthcare is one of the central issues that a lot of people were talking about in the meetings we've just been in. And the other thing that that I think is really central to this story that also sometimes gets marginalized because it's so hard to talk about is the realities of how central sexual violence is in prison in general, and then in particular the ways it's targeted against trans people. And Eric, we haven't heard from you yet. I don't know if you want to just kind of chime into the conversation so we can mix it up.
Sure, I'm going to go backwards and then we can go forwards. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the contemporary landscape of the prison, and oftentimes many of us use the term the prison industrial complex because we're really interested in thinking about the prison but also beyond the prison, right? All the relationships of capital and carceral logics that produce this thing called the prison industrial complex, right? So it's a more expansive term. And right now in the United States, there's at least 2.5 million people in prisons, right? 2.5 million people. And then there's about 13 to 14 million people under the direct supervision, parole, probation, halfway houses, et cetera, of some direct part of the prison industrial complex, right? So like Dean was saying in the beginning, we're in a time of mass incarceration. And something I wanted to talk a little bit about is thinking about this contemporary moment also where there is possibly a national conversation around prisons, policing, and immigration enforcement, et cetera, is oftentimes we hear this argument that prisons are broken, we need to fix them, right? That's kind of the rhetoric that's going around. And something that many of us that organize from a prison abolitionist perspective argue is that prisons are in fact not broken, they're working exactly how they're supposed to work, meaning they're racist, colonial, ableist, transphobic sites of pure violence, right? And so one of the questions we ask ourselves, and taking a lead from Janetta that just said a cage is a cage is a cage, right? Do we want a kinder, gentler form of brutality, or do we want to end brutality, right? And so the work that I've been engaged in with a lot of these people is arguing for prison abolition, right? Which means that we can and must radically rethink the way that we deal with harm, the way that we deal with accountability, and the way that we deal with each other. That necessarily asks us to rethink the entire world, right? That's a really big project. But the alternative is what we have now, right? And so we're really invested in holding on to a radical imagination that can dream beyond the vastness of the prison industrial complex, while also working in solidarity with people that are incarcerated right now, right? So through direct services or through pen pals or through helping people out in whatever way you can, re-entry, et cetera, right? So it's not just about dreaming for something else and not doing anything in the right here, right now, but we can do all these smaller acts while keeping our eye on the larger politic of prison abolition.
And Janetta and Alisha both work at organizations that do really intense direct support for people who are coming out of prison and who are in prison right now, also from an abolitionist perspective. And Janetta, I think TJIJP's model of, like you were telling me earlier today about like making sure that every single person who comes out and comes to TJIJP stays at someone else's house. I wonder if you would just talk about like that support system you guys are creating that I wish existed in every single community in the US, but I think TJIJP is pretty special.
One of the things that we do at TGIJP, we have we're a grassroots organization, and what we do is we correspond with people that are in custody, and we provide information and resources for them, and when certain things, like a lot of times when people are in a SHU, they don't get access to the law library and they need various information. We go in and find that information and we send it to them. And we also just support people in getting out, specifically recidivism. We work with the transgender community, and as soon as they get out of jail, we meet them at the bus station, and we work with them, and we have members that are on the outside that have been through the political educations, that are members of TGIJP that have gotten out. So we sort of kind of like recycle them. Like once a person gets out, we make arrangements for them to stay with a person that's been out for quite a few years, and they sort of kind of like teach them to stand up and advocate for themselves for medical and mental health, because most people, period, but most transgender people leave prison with trauma. You know, a lot of, I mean, it's just like, that is the most demeaning and demoralizing place that I've ever experienced in my life. And, you know, I haven't used crack in like 16 years, but my experience is that, I mean, there were times that I thought that, you know, being in prison was worse. I mean, just the degradation that one faces inside a place like that. And it slowly strips you of who you are as a transgender person. I mean, it's just like, I was sharing earlier at a group, it's just like being a transgender woman and being in custody around men, it's just like there's no safe place for us to be. I mean, I can remember going through a long periods of time that I just wanted to be in a cell by myself so that I can at least see my body, because it's like you don't get an opportunity to see yourself. I mean, it's just like you're faced with so much day-to-day survival and trauma and just stuff that CC talked about, which is so true. I mean, it's amazing how these ladies just hit it right on the head about, you know, just every day you have to have your guards up. You can't be weak and vulnerable. So it's just one of the things that I have a problem with is better access to mental health care. Specifically, hadn't had the opportunity to be, you know, the only transgender at an institution of 1,300 inmates in Sheridan, Oregon. That's why I don't like Seattle, because it's too close to Oregon. But, you know, just not really receiving the medical and mental health support that one needs when they get out. You know, it's just like placing all this trauma on people. I'm working with a person that just did 20 years in prison, and I worked with this person, and how I met this person walking down the street, and this person had did 20 years in prison, and had only been out for like 3 months. And then we're talking, as we talk, you know, and I'm asking him about, well, where do you see medical, where do you receive mental health? And he's like, oh, I've been to mental health, and they sent him an appointment like 37 days later. And I'm like, no, who, you know, I'm like, how a person that spent 20 years in prison, and this person is scared to turn on the light. Because in prison, you don't turn on no lights, you don't lock no doors, you don't go too close to windows, and it's just like, they just put him out and no access to mental health care. And I had to do a lot of advocacy work around that to support this person in getting them into like more immediate access to mental health care because this person is placed in this world with all this fear and no resources, very little resources. And I'm like, you have to talk to people and you have to tell them where you've been so that they could have an understanding. And he's like, I told them that I just got out of prison and I did 20 years and they told me come back in 37 days. What's wrong with that picture? You know what I mean? It's just like that, I don't know. But if you listen to this video as Cece and Laverne expressed it, I mean, it is so real and so visible. And I'm going to pass to somebody else.
Yeah, Alisha, I wondered if you would talk a little bit. I mean, one thing that Janetta just mentioned is the issue of solitary and the ways in which trans people are often placed in, really heightened, intense, torturous conditions in prison, and about that, and also just some of the cycles of poverty and imprisonment that I know your work is trying to intervene on.
That's a lot.
Or whatever you want.
So I think a lot has been said in the media and a lot of these panels that I go to where people are starting to understand how solitary confinement affects queer and trans people in prisons. Oftentimes when people are processed through intake, the prison might say, we're going to isolate you for your own safety because we don't really know how other people are going to react to you, so we're just going to put you in isolation. Other times they're just like, we view the sexual predator and we're concerned for the safety of other people, so we're going to isolate you. So basically their reaction to not understanding queer and trans issues is to just isolate you and keep you away from people. There are instances where people are placed into general population. We have community members who are just like, I much prefer being in general population because it's like being in a high school cafeteria. I can find the crowd where I fit in and where I feel okay and safe. And when the guards are messing with me, I have other witnesses around. And there are some people who are in general population and they write to us and they say, you know what, I want to be in protective custody. I don't feel safe around these other people. Usually a lot of times people are reporting that the violence that they face, it starts with the guards. And once other people who are incarcerated see that the guards can blatantly disrespect them, then other people take advantage of them as well. So then they write to us and say, I want to be placed in protective custody. Before we advocate for anybody to be placed in protective custody, we write back and we make sure that they know what that really means, because it's really a deceptive name. You think that that's something different from people who are isolated for disciplinary reasons. You're thinking that you're going to be protected, you're going to be safe once you're isolated. But usually what we say is, you just said you're having problems with the guards. Once you're isolated, the only people who have access to you are the prison guards. So think about whether or not that actually means safety to you. We also like to make sure that people understand that going to protective custody oftentimes means a loss of programs. Carolyn was mentioning earlier how she was getting involved in activities at the prison, whether it was a church, the choir, different activities that she just wanted to keep her mind going and making sure that she was prepared to re-enter society. And oftentimes when people are placed in protective custody, they lose access to all those programs that might qualify them for an early release or that might look good to the parole board. So that's another reason why we warn people against protective custody. But we also have people who are in general population who say, just on the basis of me identifying as trans or queer, I have the guards discriminate against me. I'm not allowed access to the higher paying jobs. Not that that's a lot of money, but the higher paying jobs, they don't give me access to those. They'll only allow me to be a porter, and being a porter is like the lowest paying job. And we also have people who are just like, I go into these programs, I try to participate and look good for the parole board, but I face so much harassment and violence from the guards and other people who are incarcerated that it's hard to maintain and really actively participate. And I think sometimes people don't really think about the various forms of violence that people are experiencing in prison. And that could be the invasive searches, people who report leaving their cell and being immediately thrown up against a wall and groped, especially if they have breasts. the guards will grope them, will force them to engage in sex work within the prison. You also have people making derogatory comments, and if someone has access to a bra, we've had guards, when people were out of their cell, the guards would go in, take their bras and panties and hang them up all around the cell so that other people could see it and ridicule people. So there are various forms of sort of, some people will call it like invisible violence, the isolation, the verbal harassment, the invasive searches and pat-downs, derogatory names, and then you have obviously the prevalence of sexual assaults committed by the guards and other people who are incarcerated. And all of those things also prevent people from actively engaging in programs and jobs that are available to them in prison. So we have to fight against all of that instead of just saying, this is what you should be doing. We need to be listening to the various reasons why people are not participating in these different forms of programming. I saw Janetta grab the mic. I wanted to see if you were.
Oh, I just wanted to share that specifically when Cece spoke about, her reasons for not wanting to transfer to a women's prison, because it's just oftentimes when you go to institution, every institution you go to, they strip you down. And, you really get sick of people looking at your body, that's another form of degradation, with everywhere you go, people looking at your body. And some of the officers, they want you to take off your clothes so they could see your body, and it's just, that's another thing that I feel like a lot of people don't understand, that you're further being degraded by, having people look at your body so often. Every time you turn around, somebody want to look at your naked body. It's just, and I could see why she did not want to be transported to another institution, because like every county they cross, they have to stop at the jail, and you have to strip out, and you got everybody there looking at your body, and having, officers, COs, just like standing there like looking. I can remember when I was in Oklahoma, which is the Federal Transport Center, I was like, all you got to do is go to the website and look at blackts.com, and you will find all kind of black TSs. Don't look at me.
And another thing, when she says about being transferred, they take your property, they lose your property. You have to start all over again. And then if you are able to get a job, okay, I got paid 75 cents an hour. And that was just building my way up from 30 cents. A lead man position is $1.75 is a lead man position. So you save up your little coins and stuff, because just think, if you have to pay restitution, they take 10% of that. So that leaves you with a sum of really nothing. You might be able to buy you some toothpaste and a bar soap and stuff. So by you being a girl and want to be clean, that creates a problem for you because of your hygiene. That makes you feel bad. There's always little things that make you feel bad in there. They have a way of, like in CMC where I was at, California Men's Institution, that is a one-man cell, and they was putting 2 people in a one-man cell. And they had a bed on the wall and a bed over here. If you let the bed on the wall down, there is no way for you to walk up and down the aisle. You have to get up on his bed and sit there while he walk up and down the aisle while you're in the cell doing whatever you. That's why you have to compromise and be. Believe me, I made it sound fun and easy and stuff, but a lot of that stuff got on my nerves, and my only way of dealing with that, so that I would keep some type of sanity, because I can't let these people cheat me. I felt as though if they took my sanity, they won, and I wasn't going to let them do that to me. So I bit and chewed a lot. My cellie, a gang member, and guys on the yard would say things about me being in his cell. Well, he thought about it. I have migraine headaches. And when I have a migraine headache, that person right there is always there putting a cold rag on my head, trying to be nice to me, trying to help me. But you all are talking about this person and you don't even know what's going on. I had that much of protection because of the kindness that I did for him. But he was a prick in his own way too, and I had to tolerate his mess. And as far as for my underwear and stuff, yes, by me working in a sewing factory, well, you work in a sewing factory, girl, you might as well sew you some panties up and make you. and I made my little panties, and I had my little bras, and they would take them and they would throw them in the middle of the hallway. They would come and shake my cell down and just throw my little panties and stuff on the floor, and that was embarrassing. You know, come to think about it, that was really embarrassing. Even though they were clean and brand new, it was still embarrassing because I didn't want them people to know what I had on. That wasn't none of their business. It wasn't no Victoria's Secret thing going on here, you know. and my cellie, he would say, and I was on my hormones, and I needed for my children to look right. They said if you wear a bra, and it keeps your children up, and it makes you look more presentable, because that's just who I am. I am a woman, but I'm not a female. So I know what I had to have, and I had to have my bra. They would tear stuff up. It was embarrassing in a lot of ways. They would read my mail, for instance. They would read my mail, and they would ask me certain questions sometimes that pertained to the letter that I had. They would talk about it loud. It wasn't nothing disgusting. It was just maybe a girlfriend of mine wrote me a joke or something. Maybe a girlfriend, when she wrote me a letter, she would tell me about her trade, and he's fine. And the officer said, ooh, my, who? Is he fine? I'm like, why is this man all in my business saying all that? But to keep my sanity, I kept my hands on the wall, and I let that man go in and shake my cell down. There is another thing that really irritates me about the job system in there and being a transgender. They made it harder on the girls verbally, and it would make a lot of girls want to quit the job and leave the job, and then you'd be on the yard with nothing. And I thought that was wrong. They disrespect the girls a lot. But the girls in there, some of the girls in there that were older, would encourage the younger girls not to do the silly things that would get them caught, the mischievous things that would get them embarrassed and lose their job. And that was one of the ways we held on and stuck together on the job.
Yeah, just really quickly, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about SHU, just so people know what we're talking about. So SHU, which is Special Housing Unit, or Secure Housing Unit, or ADSEG, Administrative Segregation, is generally an 8-by-6 foot concrete box, and you're locked in there usually 23 hours a day on lockdown, sometimes more, and you have no contact with other people. You're generally fed through a slot in the door, and for the prison system, that's considered safety. Yeah, protective custody, solitary confinement. It depends on which prison, what they call it, and just as a way to think about the kind of psychological torture that actually is, right? And so if the prison considers that safety, then what do they actually think about trans, queer, and gender nonconforming life?
And they really don't care if you go out that 1 hour that is given to you, because they'll write up. Can y'all hear me? They don't care if you come out that 1 hour in the SHU program. Their main concern is that you're fed 3 times a day and you're locked up. And if they don't even really want you to come out to take showers. The guys complained about me being in the shower with them when I went to the hole. They complained about me being in the shower with them. I don't want to take a shower with that thing. Yeah, girl, they told me that. And they didn't understand it. I really didn't want to see none of their fat, sloppy-looking asses neither, And the first thing, this is what pisses me off, and I'm sorry for getting off track, but what pisses me off is that they won't give us a chance. The first thing that comes to their mind is sex. they can't get past the bedroom when it comes to us. And half of us don't even care nothing about nothing that. We're not even thinking about what's going on in the bedroom. I knew I wasn't. I wanted to go to school. I wanted to work. But they want to lock you down. They want to put you in a hole. They want to get away from here. They had cages built for a shoe program for you to come out and be in a cage with just your underwear on. And you walk around this cage for 1 hour, and the cage was like, you see how that door is right there? It was thin like that, but long. That is an exercise for your own self. How can you move around in something like that? And they leave you out there. Sometimes they leave you out there 2 hours. So that was one of the things.
Just the shoe, which is sometimes it's called protective custody, and sometimes it's called, and basically it's just another form of oppression because when you put a transgender person in a shoe for their own protection, basically they use the shoe as a way of just getting you off, getting you like not dealing with the issue. It's just instead of dealing with the issue and creating policies and creating safety and trying to find out how to make sure. I can remember them always saying that the most important thing is keeping you safe as an inmate in this institution. However, who's going to keep me safe from you? Because you're just as much as a perpetrator as them, because you perpetuate just as much verbal and psychological abuse and in some instances physical abuse against me as they do. So it's just a never-ending thing of oppression, how people are being oppressed, and then you put transgender on top of that, and it's just like this is just another layer of oppression that's being placed on the transgender community, because like Alisha said, being in the shoe, it prevents you from participating in early release programs and job training programs, and it prevents you from participating in all these different activities for the betterment of your recidivism and when you get out. And but a lot of times, because the transgender community has been beat down so bad and just kicked around and just mistreated in so many different ways, it's just like they accept that and they don't have the voice. And one of the things that we do at TGIJP is we try to advocate. We refer to our people in custody as members, and one of the things that we try to do is provide them with as much information and literature and just anything that they could get their hands on to read so that they can be empowered enough to stand up for themselves and advocate for themselves, and also be able to present people with information that being about what's being changed, what policies are being changed, so not only can they speak about the policies that are being changed, but they can also give them a copy of it, because a lot of times things happen, policies change on the inside, policies are changed from the outside in, but they don't give inmates, they don't give people in custody that information. They basically keep information from you so that you don't know how you're supposed to be treated as a person. And I wanted Eric to talk a little bit more about that.
Let me tell you a little bit about the men's. I also want to tell you there's a men, because this is coming up, certain things. There's a thing called, and I'm pretty sure it started back in Chicago, it's called the Men's Advisory Council, MAC. I was a part of that, and I was an MAC for people with HIV that was in the hospital, and it was basically the trans women, gay boys that was in the hospital, and we were in Vacaville, And in Vacaville, some of the windows were broken out, and it was very cold in there. And you have people that are full blown sleeping up under a window, or they would turn the heater on, and they would turn it on full blast, and the people in there would be so hot because it would be a dorm of 12 people in this hot little box in the summertime. So I became an MAC member so that I could be a representative for the hospital for people with HIV. They fought me so much. I would come in there and the nurses would say, it's that time. Because if an inmate told me that something had happened to them, I would immediately fill a 602 form out, and I would take it to our leader. His name was Ray Baldwin, and he knew the law inside out. And he would terrorize those nurses. So it was a fight for a long time. And when I left there, all the windows were closed. They fixed the central air heating thing that they needed to fix for the inmates. They felt better. They were getting a change of linen. They wasn't even changing their linen. Didn't even want to talk. They treated them so bad. And, you know, to look at these people and know some of them who was healthy and vibrant, now you see in your friend or someone that you knew many years ago that was one of the hot babes are laying in a bed dying. And these people that's supposed to have their jobs have these nice jobs because they get paid good money to go in there and be a nurse, good money to be a security guard. They're just messing over them and letting the inmates mess over them, treat them really bad. It's really horrible. It has improved a little, but there's still a really, really long way to go. Long way.
I think we should go to the audience questions, but I just wanted to hear from you one more time. Eric, did you have something else you wanted to add? Okay, because we have about 20 minutes left. Sabina's going to pass the mics. So just raise your hand or somehow gesture if you want to ask a question or make a comment.
Okay, so my question is, let's say you're a member of the community, you're not trans, but you want to be of help to the trans community. And what's the best way to do that without kind of not getting to the getting to the larger issues? Because you don't want to try to help to the trans community in one way that's kind of not helping them in the larger way. And does that make sense?
That's great. Yeah, I think I might take a few questions just so that then we can hear from the panel. Is that okay? I'll take a few more and then we'll kind of get at them. Is that okay? You want to get it? Okay, do it.
First of all, what would it be that you would really want to do? What is it? What area?
You've asked a good question.
Do you like to write?
I do like to write, thank you.
Do you like to answer letters?
Yes.
Perhaps volunteering would be a nice thing to do, research and volunteering, to do answer letters. How's that sound?
Sounds good to me.
And you wouldn't be directly involved, but you would be involved. You would be a big help because you would do research, and it would be on your own time and how you wanted to do it.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you. Sorry, I forgot your name again. Thank you, Carolyn.
Basically, what I would interpret that you're saying is how do you get to be an ally to the transgender community and get involved in providing support? And one of the things that we do is we have a letter writing program that meet every Tuesday night from 4:30 to 8:30, and we respond. We pull out our laptops and computers, and we respond to prison mail. And we provide a lot of very important information and resources, but we also have became a surrogate family to a lot of the people that are in custody. And one of the things about it is that a lot of times transgender people don't have family support. So that's why it's so important that there's organizations in place that can support the transgender people getting the information they need so that they can be, because if your family's not going to send you the information, you're not going to get the information. And that's why all these organizations are so important, because, once again, we can make the changes out here, but if we can't send the information into them to let them know the changes. And there's various ways that you could get involved in supporting the transgender community. You don't have to be trans. I mean, you don't have to be gay. You don't have to be. All you have to do is see social injustices that are happening in various communities that you could be an ally to. It's no more than in the 60s and the 70s when Martin Luther King and the marches. It wasn't all black people marching. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't all black people. So it's just like the issue you might not have the issue that we have, but you could still be a support and be an ally to our community.
Also, to say something from a Seattle perspective for folks who live here, here at Seattle U, there have been times when students have run letter writing projects to correspond with trans prisoners and LGBT prisoners, or broader letter writing projects, and that's something that student groups can really start easily. That's happening at a lot of college campuses. And there's a website called Black and Pink that has lists of people seeking pen pals. So that's something everyone can do, and that's often nice to do in a group, so you get mutual support. And the other thing, I think, especially for people here living in Seattle, is that King County is planning to spend $210 million to build a new youth jail. And queer and trans people are some people who will be really impacted by that. And we can all be working to fight that and say, actually, $210 million could go towards a lot of other things that people in our communities need, like child care and income support and housing and all the things that lead to the fact that people become criminalized, including youth. And we know that youth in King County, when they become criminalized, end up, are funneled towards the adult prison system, and that disproportionately impacts Black and Native youth in our county. So there's a lot that we can be doing very locally that is so, so, so central to supporting all the people most impacted by imprisonment, including trans people. So I just want to add those for local ones. Do you all want to add anything on that?
I just wanted to be clear about something, and I wanted to be outed as, in this movement, in terms of supporting the transgender community and creating better quality of living and making sure that the transgender community have access, I really don't want to be lumped to the G and the L and the B. And I don't want our community to be lumped to the G and the L and the B. And the reason why I don't want our community to be lumped to the G and the L and the B is because right now we're in a major crisis. It's just like, you have to have had the opportunity to sit down and listen to some of these letters that are being written to us and all the sexual abuse that the transgender community face solely based on their gender orientation and just being denied access solely on their gender orientation, and it's really sad and very painful. You just have to have had the opportunity to really hear the stories on how much trauma that is being infringed upon the transgender community solely based on the fact that they're transgender. They're doing the best that they can to live in their gender orientation, and against all odds, we still are who we are, throughout all the punishment and the pain and all the physical and sexual abuse that has been infringed upon us solely based on our gender. And don't get me wrong, I love the G and the L and the B, but I'm saying right now, my focus is on my sisters, you know what I'm saying? Because my sisters have been through so much trauma and abuse that they don't even know the trauma they have. So, and Eric is going to speak a little bit more about that.
Eric wants me to take the next question instead.
There's a question up there.
Great.
Thank you for this incredible panel and your perspectives. It's absolutely wonderful. And I had a question. The name of the panel is Trans Liberation, and I'm trying to get a sense of what does that actually mean? And from what I'm hearing, it seems to be one component of that is about the exercise and enforcement of legal rights and basic human rights. And so could you maybe speak a little more to help me understand what trans liberation means just beyond the legal aspect?
Eric, will you start us off?
Yeah, I think that we're obviously focusing on issues of incarceration, imprisonment, and policing policies because that's what we're here for. But that's one aspect, and I think that within our movements, we're always hopefully centering people that are what we usually call the most directly impacted. And right now, particularly trans women of color, and even more particularly Black trans women and Native trans women inside U.S. prisons and detention centers are facing some of the most kind of immediate and horrific conditions imaginable, right? And so, and a lot of what many of us on this panel are trying to do, and many people inside and outside of prisons, are trying to kind of change the national agenda around, what oftentimes gets called the LGBT politics, and what we're trying to do is kind of shift the conversation away from marriage and the military and hate crimes enhancements towards supporting people that are directly impacted in prison as an abolitionist politic, right? So we're kind of trying to do the direct support to help people inside and also change larger conversations and flows of money, right? Because those mainstream organizations are really well funded, and most of the really amazing, radical, more necessary movements are incredibly underfunded, right? And so knowing why that's happening and how we can rearrange materially these movements.
Maybe we'll take a few more just since we're kind of short on time. Sabina's kind of.
So I think the basic, I've been trying to think for the last 5 minutes about my question, but my basic conception is I recently took the training for solidarity with trans community and just learning about all of this. And the one trend that I've seen a lot in what you have spoken about, the treatment you received in prison and how Janet Mock was treated by Piers Morgan and Laverne Cox and everyone was treated, is how do we support in a way to not fuel the sensationalism of being trans like it's the new greatest thing, because I feel like whenever a minority is represented as something that needs to be changed, it is always sensationalized in our society with Orange is New Black, Glee for Gay, and how do you fight that? And how do you reframe the conversation so that it doesn't continue?
I just want to link that too, because in our meetings, we also discussed the ways that only certain trans people are really lifted up, people who look a certain way, and that can also be part of that. And I think that's another aspect of this moment of attention is which kinds of trans people do we care about. Janetta, you talked about that really powerfully at the meetings. I don't know if you want to share the ways that certain women get left out of the picture. I thought it was really brilliant what you said. Only if you want to, no pressure.
First of all, it is the best thing.
I think that we see Laverne, we see Cece, we see us sitting up here, but there's a population of transgender people that have that just doesn't have the information and the resources to really advocate for themselves. So there has to be a little bit of media attention, and there has to be, at somehow, some way, we have to begin to engage the conversation of the poor treatment of transgender people, and specifically transgender people of color, because we look at those numbers that were on the board, and those are some very high numbers for transgender people, and also as it specifically pertains to, is the 47% of African American transgender people, you know, and I think the only way that I think the transgender community has really like woken up and became conscious and aware that the way we've been treated in the past, we no longer want it to be treated that way, and we're really standing up and advocating for ourselves, and we're making noise, and we're doing the best way we can. You know, I mean, it's just like, I mean, I'm not saying that we don't care how we get there, but we're going, you know, and my thing is I used to tell you know, back in the day, the boys used to slip in our back door. You know, it's just like, no, honey, if you can't come to my front door and knock on my front door, don't come at all. You know what I mean?
Or wait till nightfall to want to roam the city and come and get you. You know, this is my intake on what you were talking about. Yes, there are girls out there that don't have the breasts, that live as a woman, that rather wear the clothes and not have the sensational things that we have here, the children. But that does not mean that the children will not come. Everybody has their moments. It's a process. I feel as though for me it was a process. Okay, first you leave home, you're free, and then you get arrested. You're not free anymore. This is a whole totally different thing. Now, you have this girl over here that has breasts, but you don't have breasts. So that means that you have to work it some other kind of way. You have to have a chippy personality. You got to be a go-getter. Well, that's just the way it is. Everybody isn't not going to have breasts, but that doesn't mean make them less of a woman. You know, so people have to stop looking at all this and start looking at this here. What comes from here is what's important.
I think we have another question.
I think everybody gets to decide, and everybody gets to determine how they identify. And I think that's very important. And also keeping in mind that there's many variations of transgenderism, and it's just like nobody gets to decide who they are, but that individual. So yeah, somebody had a question.
Oh, I do. I just want to say I'm really humbled and honored that you shared your very personal stories. And I kind of have this larger question. It totally makes sense. The history of the United States is based on the theft of indigenous land and looking at black people's bodies as labor, right? Chattel slavery. And so I'm thinking about, like, what does it mean to build a solidarity movement with indigenous peoples if all of these social movements are really important, but they're happening on stolen land? So, like, how does that, how do we think more about how to unite our movements? Because I really think sometimes indigeneity is not centralized in these discussions. And also on a personal level, when I think about a Native Pacific Islander and the colonial legacy of where I'm from in the Mariana Islands really instilled this kind of homophobic and transphobic violence that happens. And I was actually put into prison because of self-harm, because of being genderqueer. And so this stuff is very personal to me, but I'm trying to think of a larger question of how we can build solidarity together.
I think we have to, well, I think a lot of times, I think that, 1, 2, 3, I think that people need to let go some of the political stuff and start agreeing on the small stuff and stop. Every time a person comes up with an idea, let's kind of sit back and say, okay, well, as a group, we can attack this ideal and we can work together on this ideal. Even though I may think that this ideal is not a good ideal, this person came up with a good idea with an idea that could work. People want power, and so that's the reason why nothing really works, because everybody want to have power. It has to do with power. And you got people's lives in your hand because you have the authority to do a change, and you won't do it because of power.
Do other folks want to speak to the indigeneity question and colonialism?
I think one of the ways that we could do some cross-movement building and work with different groups, especially Native populations, is to take a deeper look at our history. A lot of times when people are talking about prison, especially in this new environment of media attention right now, they're acting like this is a new issue. The overpopulation of our prisons, especially with people of color, but our prison system has been around since this country was founded, and using isolation as a tool for control and breaking down communities is just a part of the United States of America. And I was reading something recently where the writer was talking about how in 1776, I think there was like the Walnut Street Jail in Philadelphia was created. And some of the first people in that jail were indigenous people and people of color. And I think we need to do more work in sharing those stories so that we can talk about how the issues of incarceration today are no different than they were at this country's founding. And once people are really educated on that issue, I think it'll be easier for us to work together and see how these issues, whether we're talking about trans women of color, or we're talking about black men being stopped and frisked on the streets, we'll see like all of these different correlations, and it'll be easier for people to work together when we start seeing them as the same issue, because they are.
I wanted to give an example of how because it's modern day slavery. It's modern day slavery. Whether you pay somebody 48 cents a day or 75 cents an hour, it's modern day slavery because, I mean, you lose your value and worth. How do you feel about yourself? You're working for that little bit of money. You know, it's just that it's just another form of oppression to get you to lose your value and to lose your worth. I mean, you're getting paid 48 cents a day to do a job that they're getting paid, $54 an hour to do. It's just like there's alternatives to that. I mean, they could pay people a living wage, and while people are in custody, they can help support their children. You know what I mean? Opposed to just, there has to be a solution. There has to be better ideas of how, in situations like that, we could support people and still holding on to some of their respect and dignity, because we're going to be returned to society, and you're sending us out, you're returning us back into society beat down and bruised up, even worse than before we went in. It's just like, yeah.
I'm mindful that we're coming to an end, and I want to, maybe we'll take just one last comment, yeah.
Mahalo nui loa for the panel. So I'm a Native trans woman currently in a PhD program, and I survived the streets and incarceration, and it's been a long journey for me, and I just want to say mahalo, because I know it's hard. Mahalo means thank you in Olelo Hawaii in Hawaiian. And I heard Jay ask the question over there, and I think this idea of going back to our history and looking at how we're all connected is a really important place to start. And thinking about also how we connect. How do we connect our movements, for example, to do something practical in terms of creating opportunities for creating pathways to recidivism that allow all people who come out of the incarceration or who come out of the criminal injustice world to have access to higher education. As some of you may know, it's very difficult to get a job if you have a criminal record, right? And in some places, they're trying to make it so that if you have a criminal record, you can't even get into an institution of higher learning. So I'm curious to know if there's any sort of work being done around those issues and how we might come together and Oh, oh.
Thank you. We need you because by you being the lady that you are, you could spread this because they would listen to you because you're educated and you've gone through a whole lot to get to where you're at. I would listen to you. I would vote for you, girl.
I wanted to say that I know there's a few states that have recently passed, but I was just checking my email. All of Us Are None, LSPC, TGIJP, and a couple other organizations have been really rallying and advocating for Ban the Box, which basically means that any employers or any housing situation that you get involved in, and I know for sure that it's in San Francisco, but we're trying to focus a lot on the entire state of California. But anybody doing business with San Francisco cannot put on their applications or ask you, have you ever been convicted of a felon? And that's particularly in terms of work and housing. So that's the kind of things that need to be taken care of. But you know, it's just like LSPC, TGIJP, and All of Us Are None. We can't do that. It's not all convicted felons doing that. You know, it's not all formerly incarcerated people doing that. We have allies, people like you guys, that support us in making the necessary changes because it's like it's just important that people have access to housing. You know, people need access to housing. You know, people need employment to take care of themselves. So there has to be a solution, and that's the kind of stuff that's being worked on, and that's why these organizations are so important, and that's why it's so important that we sit at the table and have these conversations and try to strategize to help the most marginalized and disenfranchised at least create some type of stability into where you can have access to basic human needs. You know, everybody should be housed, you know. Everybody should be fed, you know, and with respect and dignity, you know. So, yeah.
Thank you. Do you want to say one more thing? Yeah, go for it.
One of the things that we touched on a lot today was talking about isolation, and specifically in the prison context, talking about being in the box, being in shoe. But just looking more broadly at isolation, the prison system works very, very hard to make sure that groups like us can't get our newsletters in, that we can't advocate for people, we can't educate them on the policies that affect them on the inside and on the outside. So what we need to do is make sure that we are fighting against that isolation every day by continuing to write and fighting them when they're rejecting our letters, having interns and volunteers in our offices making those phone calls to the mail clerks, to the superintendents, and also creating opportunities for people to be actively involved in our organizations, whether they're on the inside or on the outside. Again, with access to our newsletters, submitting artwork for our calendar that's up here. You know, when people participate in our prisoner advisory committee, we make sure that we are sending them certificates that they can show to the parole board. So if the prison's not going to allow them to participate in programs on the inside, we're going to show them that we have programs that they can participate in on the outside, and send them those certificates, advocate for them when they're up for parole. And then when they come out, like, we are a very small organization and we don't always have volunteer opportunities, but we try to make sure that when we have a mailing party or something going on, people can come in. If we need shredding done, something simple like answering the phone, like, we are providing opportunities that other employment agencies may not be providing to people. So doing our best to make sure that we are providing access and outlets for them to build up their resume, build up their self-esteem, like, just making sure that we are doing all that we can and not just relying on, like, legal letters or whatever.
Thanks. I think we have to wrap up, and I just want to say how grateful I am to all of you for being part of this panel and part of this conversation. And I think that one of the themes in our meetings for the last few days has been that prisons are not the only institution we're concerned about, and we've talked a lot about the ways in which homeless shelters operate like prisons, and the child welfare system operates like a prison, and schools operate like prisons, and how we can, those of us who live in Seattle and in the region, really look deeply at the interconnection between these institutions and our own communities, between the child welfare system and the juvenile punishment system and the adult shelter and prison systems, and really be actively engaged in how our counties and cities try to keep us out of those processes and try to keep us from noticing what's going on, where we can make like really intense local change and also provide direct support. And so these people are all doing work that really models that. So I hope you'll come get their materials and also look at their websites, because a lot of it is stuff that really we can all do. It's not only for lawyers or for people doing, lobbyists. It's really much more about local people trying to support one another and break that isolation and make connections and really transform our local conditions where we live. So I hope that you all will take inspiration from these people from all over and also work with each other and work together to see what we can do here. And thank you all so much. And thanks to Sabina and everybody at OMA for putting this event on.
Thank you.